Okay, we should have mic access.
Yes, I should. Hello,
Yes.
everyone.
No, Kristin Halsworth.
Okay.
Confirmed. Can you hear me, Ishrat?
Yes, I can hear you. Can everyone hear me?
Fantastic.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
We're letting everyone in. Candy, are you?
Yep.
Is everyone in?
Yeah.
That was in the waiting room?
Yeah, it should be letting already.
All right. So, well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ishrat Nazmi, and I am really happy that all of you can join us. We have some people from CCAT joining us here also. So we have some live audience for today's webinar. So today's webinar is DoD Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment Program, IBAS, what you need to know. Again, my name is Ishrat Nazmi. I'm the Business Development Manager at CCAT. I'm sorry, at Connecticut APEX Accelerator, and I'll be your host for today. So it's been a little bit of challenge trying to get everyone in, but I'm so glad that all of you are able to join and hear us. So we are coming to you live from our office at the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, or CCAT. As you can see the banners behind me, this webinar is brought to you by the Connecticut APEX Accelerator in collaboration with Region 1 APEXs, which includes Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and we are happy to welcome the LaGuardia APEX Accelerator from Region 2 as well. Before we begin, I want to highlight a few housekeeping notes. Please use the Q&A tool to submit your questions at any time, where we will address your questions at the end of the webinar. A copy of today's slide will be sent to all attendees after the webinar. This session is unclassified and is being recorded for future reference. Without further ado, let's begin today's discussion. The DoD APEX Accelerator Program, formerly known as the Procurement Technical Assistant Program, was established in 1985 by the Department of Defense. Today, there are 97 APEX Accelerators across 59 states and territories, all working to make government contracting more accessible. The Connecticut APEX Accelerator is committed to educating and training businesses in our region, ensuring they have the knowledge and tools needed to successfully work with the Department of Defense and other government agencies. Connecticut APEX Accelerator is funded through a cooperative agreement with the Department of Defense and the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. Our host agency is Southeastern Connecticut Enterprise Region. The Connecticut APEX Accelerator will offer expert support in understanding and managing the intricacies of government contracting. And our services are one-on-one counseling, training, and workshops, bid matching assistance, guidance on government contracting opportunities, capability statements. And we provide all of these services and many more at no cost. We're here to help you position your business for success. And these are our office locations. The Connecticut APEX Accelerator has office locations throughout the state of Connecticut. And we're from our East Hartford office right now today from CCAT. At CT APEX, we understand that collaboration is a key to success in government contracting, and that's why we built strong strategic partnership with organizations supporting business in navigating the complexities of federal, state, and local procurement. These are our strategic partners. Here's a quick look at today's agenda. We will have welcome and introduce the APEX teams. Our guest presenter is Dr. Kristin Schaaf. She will provide an overview of the IBAS program. We will have a Q&A session and closing remarks. Before we begin today's session, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the Region 1 APEX Accelerator. Additionally, we'd like to acknowledge the LaGuardia APEX Accelerator from Region 2 for joining us today. Now let's meet the Connecticut APEX Accelerator team. We're led by our State Director, Marisol Herrera, and all of us are the counselors, and also I am also the Business Development Manager, and we are all here to help you. Next, we have Massachusetts. Unfortunately, Peter Crockett, the director of Massachusetts APEX Accelerator, could not join us today, but I'd like to welcome all of our attendees from Massachusetts. Now I'll hand it over to Vermont for a brief introduction. Who do we have from Vermont?
I'm here. Do you have our slide?
I have your slides right there. And so we have Ed from Vermont joining us. I'd say Joanne is the state director. And go ahead.
Yeah, Joanne is our state director. As you can see, we're broken up into regions across the state. Our counselors are listed below. We're also a part, as is Connecticut and Massachusetts, a part of NAPEX, the National APEX Accelerator Alliance. We all participate as well in the New England Regional Council. As I said, we're a statewide program, just like Connecticut. And our director, Joanne Spalding, is also the Region 1 director. So we assist in Vermont. We do very similar to the same services as Connecticut, and we all work very closely together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we're moving on to Maine, state of Maine.
Yes, good afternoon or good morning. My name is Brian Wallace. I am the director of the Maine APEX Accelerator, which is a program of Eastern Maine Development Corporation. And if you're a business based in Maine, hopefully you're already a client and you recognize one of our team members here. If not, I invite you to reach out to the email displayed and we will follow up with you. Thank you.
Next, we have New Hampshire.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Pease, Senior Advisor with the New Hampshire APEX Accelerator. We don't have a map because we don't regionalize here in New Hampshire. We all serve the entire state. And I hope that we do have some New Hampshire businesses attending today. And urge you to contact us if you have any questions after this event or anything regarding government contracting at all. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Rhode Island.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Chad Lewis. I am the State Director for the Rhode Island APEX Accelerator. These are our team here. Welcome everyone who's from Rhode Island, and if you have any questions after this training, feel free to reach out and we'll assist.
And lastly, we have the LaGuardia APEX Accelerator. Richard? Richard there?
Hi, Nelson, are you on?
No, Nelson is participating, but you are.
Okay, great. Well, all right. Well, welcome everyone. We're LaGuardia APEX Accelerator. We're in Region 2. We serve the County of Queens, New York, and this is our team. Nelson Ortiz is the director. Dylan is our procurement counselor, and Alex Mai is our procurement specialist.
Thank you so much. So thank you to all of my APEX colleagues for those intros. Now let's move to the main portion of today's session. We're so honored to have Dr. Schaaf. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Kristin Schaaf, the Deputy Director for the Innovation, Capability, and Modernization ICAM Office at the Department of Defense, which oversees the Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment IBAS Program. With over 15 years of experience spanning government and academia, Dr. Schaaf has played a pivotal role in advancing manufacturing technologies within the Department of Defense. In her current role, she focuses on strengthening the U.S. defense industrial base, driving investment in key manufacturing sectors, addressing supply chain challenges, enhancing workforce development. Prior to her current positions, Dr. Schaaf held key roles within the Department of the Navy, including serving as chief scientist for the Advanced Manufacturing Systems team at Marine Corps Systems Command, where she helped establish the first advanced manufacturing program of record. Dr. Schaaf holds a PhD and MS in mechanical engineering with minor in materials science from UC San Diego and BS in mechanical engineering from Tulane University. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Kristin Schaaf.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for that kind introduction, Ishrat. We really appreciate the opportunity to join you today for this webinar. And so a big thank you to the Connecticut APEX Accelerator for hosting. And again, thank you for all the collaboration from both Region 1 and Region 2 APEX Accelerators today. I'm really honored to participate in this webinar, and I know our entire office really appreciates the opportunity to share with you all an overview of our IBAS program portfolio, and we do look forward to engaging with you all and all of the breadth of defense manufacturing industry participants that are joining us here today. I think many of you can appreciate that the work that we do is really about balancing what we see as local capabilities against regional needs and national priorities. And so opportunities like this webinar today are absolutely critical. We can go to the next slide, Ishrat. And so looking over some of the names that we have joining us today, I know I do see some familiar faces, but I know that many of you are going to be new to us as well. And so I wanted to be sure to begin by providing y'all with a baseline introduction to really who we are and what we do. Our Innovation, Capability, and Modernization, or ICAM office, as we refer to it, our team is composed of highly agile, deep generalists that I think, as you will see, are very, very passionate about the U.S. industrial base. And so we work hard and really strive to be the partner of first choice. And we earn and strive to keep the trust of those that we really do have the absolute pleasure of working with. As you'll see in a future slide, we have very broad yet very powerful authorities in order to manage as well as execute our IBAS program. And we work to catalyze and inspire in order to really stimulate and amplify investments that bring value. I do want to make sure to note that our IBAS program is strictly an RDT&E, or Research Development Test and Evaluation Appropriation type. And as such, developing what we see as those strong public-private partnerships is absolutely key to successfully transitioning our efforts into enduring capabilities. So we work to sustain, expand, as well as create opportunities for industrial-based policy. And we do so across what we refer to as defense critical technology sectors. And as you'll see on the slide here, the following focus priorities include energy storage and batteries, castings and forgings, critical materials, kinetic capabilities, microelectronics, as well as that very important and cross-cutting sector of workforce. Now, ultimately, our ICAM office strives to help the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Industrial-Based Policy build both supply chain reliability and resiliency through workforce development, as well as other industrial capacity initiatives that align to and mitigate the challenges and risks. Next slide. So our ICAM office in executing the IBAS program is literally building the next generation of the arsenal of democracy. And our core mission is to strengthen the competitive posture of the U.S. defense industrial base in this era of great powers and global competition. Now, as you can see here, our IBAS program priorities include preparing the defense industrial workforce, readying the modern defense industrial base, preparing for the future, technologically speaking, assessing as well as shaping risk, and building and strengthening partnerships spanning the global defense industrial base. So, our vision is that of a modern industrial base that fortifies traditional DIB capabilities and forges emerging sections that, very importantly, can respond at will to national security requirements. Now, in the previous slide, I mentioned to y'all that our IBAS program has very broad authorities. And so here you see our statutorily based authorities, and those include to support the monitoring and assessment of the industrial base, to address critical issues in the industrial base relating to urgent operational needs, to support efforts to expand the industrial base, as well as to address key supply chain vulnerabilities. Next slide. So it is the mission of the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Industrial-Based Policy to work with both domestic as well as our international partners to forge and sustain a robust, secure, and resilient industrial base to enable our warfighters both today as well as far into the future. And well, of course, we can all agree that deterrence is always preferable. But in the event of a conflict, the defense industrial base must be able to rise to that occasion, operate at both speed and scale, and ultimately provide decisive victory. As Dr. LaPlante importantly noted, America's economic security and national security are mutually reinforcing. And ultimately, the nation's military strength cannot be untethered from our overall industrial strength. So we must act now to build on recent progress to ensure that we have the capacity to produce at speed and scale. Next slide. Now, in addition to providing insight into the mission of industrial-based policy, I also want to make sure to provide some insight into our organizational structure, as I can certainly appreciate the complexity of the behemoth that is the Department of Defense and how overwhelming and certainly confusing it can be to the uninitiated. So here we begin with the Office of the Secretary of Defense, or OSD. And under that, you have the Undersecretaries of Defense for Comptroller, Intelligence, Acquisition and Sustainment, Policy, Personnel and Readiness, and Research and Engineering. Then within the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment is Industrial-Based Policy. And IBP oversees the Office of Small Business Programs, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with, industrial-based development and international engagement, and our parent office, Industrial-Based Resilience, or IBR. IBR manages policy, analysis, and transition, global investment and economic security, as well as our parent office, Manufacturing Capability Expansion and Investment Prioritization, or MSIP, which I think even for the DoD, we can all agree that MSIP is quite a doozy, but does perform a very important function. And they oversee not only our Office of Innovation, Capability, and Modernization, but also our sister investment program, the Defense Production Act, or DPA. Next slide. Now, industrial-based policy and our work across those defense critical sectors has traceability from gap identification to investments that, as you can imagine, is led by a wealth of national guidance. Now, this begins with our National Defense Strategy, and also includes our newest piece of guidance, which is the nation's, very importantly, first ever National Defense Industrial Strategy that was released just over a year ago, back in January of 24. And we also have the supporting implementation plan of the NDIS that was just published last fall. Now, DoD also targets key findings and gaps identified for mitigation through the Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation, or CAPE office, Program Management Review Group, as well as the Deputies Management Action Group, or DMAG, processes. Now, prioritize investment decisions that influence the development of the program decision memorandums, as well as the future year program objective memorandum to bolster defense critical sectors flow down from that DMAG to our ICAM office for execution. And our IBAS program supports lines of efforts that strive to close near-term as well as those longer-term gaps in America's defense manufacturing capabilities, as well as our capacity. Next slide. Now, the landmark document of the National Defense Industrial Strategy, or NDIS, identifies the growing challenges that we're seeing within the defense industrial context. And as I think many of you can relate to, these include supply chains, workforce, technological change, well-known spending constraints, as well as ever-present geopolitical threats. And the NDIS has been developed as a national industrial strategy to promote both resilience as well as a vibrant industrial base. And so the NDIS has what we view as 4 strategic priorities. And these are bucketed as supply chain resilience, our workforce readiness, very importantly, acquisition flexibility, and of course, economic deterrence. Now, all of these are designed to result in a stronger, a larger, and a much better aligned industrial base within our nation. Now, earlier this year, while supporting the NDIS publication, Ms. Kathleen Hicks, at the time Deputy Secretary of Defense, shared a particularly poignant remark that I feel really succinctly summarizes why I think we're all here today. She said, the military and the industrial base are mutually dependent. Without warfighter demand and taxpayer dollars, the U.S. defense industry as we know it could not exist. And without the capabilities the industry provides to support America's security, then America as we know it would cease to exist. So we're all in this together because wars are fought by militaries, but they are won by nations. Next slide. So, as I previously introduced, our nation's first ever National Defense Industrial Strategy set forth those 4 strategic priorities of supply chain resilience, workforce readiness, acquisition flexibility, and economic deterrence. And our office is very proud to say that we are robustly supporting all 4 of these strategic priorities. So with respect to resilient supply chains, we're investing in the defense industrial base organic capacity and capability enhancement so that we can securely produce the products, the services, those technologies that are needed now and into the future at speed, scale, and very importantly, at cost. In support of workforce readiness, we're investing in the submarine industrial base, or SIB, workforce and advanced manufacturing talent pipelines to develop a skilled and sufficiently staffed workforce. And with respect to economic deterrence, we are working on building robust partnerships such as AUKUS with Australia and the UK to bolster common defense critical sectors to support fair and effective market mechanisms that support a resilient defense industrial complex among the US and its close allies and partners to contribute to economic security and integrated deterrence. And lastly, in support of flexible acquisition, we're leveraging both federal acquisition regulation, or FAR, as well as other transaction agreements, or OTAs, for acquisitions and consortiums to lead sustainment activities. And I'll be sure to provide some additional information on these and details on those acquisition vehicles in some future slides here. We can go to the next slide. So our IBAS program portfolio supports the following investment focus areas I introduced earlier: kinetic capabilities, microelectronics, strategic and critical materials, castings and forgings, energy storage and batteries, and then that important cross-cutting sector of workforce. Strategic enablers to these technical sectors include cyber posture, small business, manufacturing, as well as workforce. And we'll deep dive into the value chains and, importantly, highlight the associated gaps that drive our investments into each of these focus areas in the future slides. Next slide. So here we depict how we actually execute our complex IBAS program, and it's through what we refer to as a federated approach. So we work in very close partnership with the military services to include the Navy, Air Force, and Army, as well as the Defense Logistics Agency and other defense agency teams. And so this federated approach extends from contracting opportunities to requirements development and ultimately to project execution. So the projects that we execute can span numerous industrial-based sectors and communities of interest. And our IBAS program acquisition pathways are identified here. Now, Cornerstone OTA remains our primary acquisition vehicle for the IBAS program. Cornerstone OTA is also known as CODA, and it's a consortium-based OTA that is a government-managed consortium. There is no membership fee associated with joining CODA, and we're very proud to boast over 1,000 members to date. And we can be sure to provide you all with the link so you can gather more information. And if you're interested, join CODA. I do want to be sure, to really highlight for you all the intrinsic value of OTAs to small businesses and non-traditional defense contractors. So while OTAs are not exclusive, they really strive to incentivize the inclusion of small businesses or non-traditional defense contractors. And they do so by enforcing a 30% cost share for businesses and traditional defense contractors that forego partnering with those small businesses and non-traditionals. Now, all of the OTAs that I've personally worked on today have included a small business or non-traditional, and I'm quite certain that all of those projects were better for it. In addition to CODA, back in July of 24, we also awarded the Submarine Workforce and Industrial Base Enterprise Integration Partnership, or SWIB EIP, to Deloitte, along with numerous teaming partners. And in addition to SWIB, we have a third contracting mechanism known as the Defense Industrial Base Consortium, or DIBC. And DIBC is a contractor managed consortium that supports IBAS as well as our sister investment portfolio, the Defense Production Act. Now, just like CODA, DIBC does not have an associated membership fee for joining. So we can similarly be sure to provide you all with the link so you can learn more about DIBC and determine if membership there is something that you'd be interested in pursuing. Next slide. So the strategic situation drives our IBAS program's investments to grow and modernize that defense industrial base capacity and capabilities. So here we put together a nested view of the strategic situation landscape. And so we begin with the threat environment. And this is defined largely by our great power competition, increasingly consequential pacing threats, and regional problem areas. So going back several years now, back in 2021, in his valedictory testimony to the Senate Armed Services Committee, Admiral Davidson really stunned his audience at the time with his observation that he believed China may seek to achieve its ambition of reunifying Taiwan with mainland China within the next 6 years. Now, simple math, of course, tells us that equates to 2027. And those of us that pay attention to history, we've seen that it has shown us that China always keeps its promises, and moreover, it tends to do so ahead of schedule. Now, that threat environment is followed by DoD's current response posture, and that's described in our national and departmental directions and authorities. Now, from there, we zero in on our community's mission focus on the health of the U.S. defense industrial base and the urgent need to mitigate the DIB's most significant risks. Because without a strong and sustainable industrial base, our ability to modernize our forces, sustain those forces, and maintain operational readiness, and when needed, pivot and surge industrial production, maintenance, repair, and overhaul are all threatened. So, all of this points to that critical need to strengthen our industrial capabilities. That highlights the need to continue recapitalizing our nation's manufacturing infrastructure and creating the conditions for more companies and their workforces to participate in the DIB. Next slide. So we'll begin with microelectronics, and the statistics of the strategic context make it abundantly clear why this is a focus area. 88% of production and 98% of assembly, packaging, and testing of microelectronics is performed overseas, primarily in Taiwan, South Korea, and China. So, should China take action to achieve its desire to reunify Taiwan with mainland China, that would decimate our microelectronics numbers. So, in order to mitigate this, significant investments through the DOC, Department of Commerce, that is, CHIPS Act, and the complementary aligned DoD investments are making great strides in reshoring the continuum of the microelectronics value chain. And events like today are incredibly valuable to expand DoD's industry outreach efforts to identify capabilities and opportunities for future partnership. Now, there are major gaps in the domestic microelectronics defense industrial base at each node in that value chain that several programs across the federal government are actively seeking to address. These investments are synergistic and they address differentiated concerns, with our IBAS program investments focusing on standing up mature, enterprise-wide RDT&E capabilities for the development of advanced defense systems. Next slide. So IBAS has strategically diversified microelectronics investments that address critical capability gaps as well as supply chain bottlenecks. And we do those across design, advanced assembly, test, and packaging, as well as sustainment. And these investments include a balance of manufacturing infrastructure, as well as the development of physical and, very importantly, digital systems to modernize the DoD. Each project is actively engaging the tri-service stakeholders to ensure both the longevity and fidelity of our IBAS program investments across the enterprise. Next slide. So, as I've mentioned, our workforce development value chain cross-cuts many of the technical sectors we also cover. So, it really covers that spectrum from outreach, awareness, and recruiting through employment to retention and data analytics to really better understand workforce supply and demand. It involves K through 12 students, importantly, their parents, veterans, STEM, technical and community colleges, four-year universities, as well as apprenticeship programs. Now, due to the manufacturing workforce strategic condition, back in 2020, our office launched what we refer to as the National Imperative for Industrial Skills Initiative, or NIST. And NIST is viewed as the DoD's response to this chronic industrial skills gaps and workforce shortages. NIST has developed a comprehensive framework model to address the continuum spanning recruit, train, hire, retain those skilled workers. Now, the key tenet is exactly what we're doing here today. Active, sustained partnering with industry, academia, military departments, federal agencies, and state governments to build mutually beneficial partnering communities. And NIST is focused on creating regionally focused activities, targeting capacity where skills are needed most. It's exceedingly important to recognize this is not simply a cut and paste activity. And while best practices and lessons learned should absolutely be shared across regions, it is also crucial to account for the uniquenesses in each of the localities. Next slide. Now, while a skilled workforce has become a major issue all across US manufacturing, it is particularly challenging within the Navy's submarine and shipbuilding sector. Now, you all might be familiar with this, especially given the region you're coming from, but the Navy is on a, no kidding, once in a generation journey to completely transform its nuclear powered submarine fleet and maintain its critical undersea advantage. Now, to do so, the Navy is pursuing a very ambitious and also very crucial plan that's known very simply as 1+2. Now, this seeks to produce one Columbia class submarine and two Virginia class submarines every year. Today, we simply don't have a workforce to build 3 submarines a year. So, this workforce problem that I think many of you are familiar with has really grown in severity over the last 20 years or so, with manufacturing moving overseas, baby boomer retirements, and just diminishing interest in the STEM careers. But the military mandate to get to 1+2 is actually going to require the addition of more than 100,000 skilled workers with the training and commitment to ensure success. So, to close the current talent deficit, we are expanding our outreach to new demographics and communities. We're trying to attract younger kids to advanced manufacturing. We are launching student competitions, like a project we have called Project MFG, that's intended to stimulate interest in the trades as an enduring career, and directing more effort on sustainment of the fleet using advanced manufacturing, which requires fewer workers to implement. Now, we're also partnering with industry, academia, other DoD offices, other federal agencies, and a wealth of other organizations, all geared to fixing our workforce problem. Next slide. Now, here you can see the geographic spread of our workforce initiatives. We have NIST investments that are distributed nationally to support defense needs. Now, as you might expect, they are most prevalent in parts of the country where industry, particularly, of course, the defense industry, is located. And as I think many of you are aware, this includes New England, as well as the Great Lakes, the Gulf Coast, and Southern California. Next slide. Now, as you're undoubtedly aware, in recent years, the national security strategy focus has shifted to the Indo-Pacific region. Now, the growth of China's military and its economic growth, combined with its aggressive and at times belligerent behavior in the Pacific, has continued to raise concerns across that region. And as a direct result, our workforce focus has also changed to some degree. So here we share our program to strengthen the industrial base in Hawaii and the Indo-Pacific region more broadly. Now, our hope is that Hawaii will become a hub for advanced manufacturing, with Guam becoming spoke number one to that hub. And we believe that these multi-million-dollar investments will enhance readiness in the near term and increase overall DoD capabilities in the long term. Next slide. So here we're detailing our wealth of investments across Hawaii and Guam to develop the necessary talent pipeline. Now, these targeted investments will help us create a sustainable manufacturing industrial capacity that's intended to meet those urgent DoD maintenance and repair needs across the Indo-Pacific region. Next slide. So we're going to shift over to critical materials. And as we look at that strategic context, once again, you see China dominating the supply chain for rare earth elements. They control 80% of the global market for rare earth elements, which are viewed as very critical ingredients in permanent magnets and other specialized applications. Resulting in the U.S. commercial and defense industrial bases being very highly exposed and vulnerable. Those rare earth elements present numerous challenges, including material shortfalls in military conflict scenarios, sole source suppliers, and supply concentration issues. Now, rare earth elements they go into components that are required in a broad range of defense applications. These could include guided munitions, flight control surfaces, as well as other strategic systems. And our IBAS program very pointedly recognizes that ensuring supply chain security for critical materials is going to be key to enabling the defense industrial base's ability to manufacture those systems and platforms for the Department of Defense. If you take the F-35, the Joint Strike Fighter, for example, there are more than 60 rare earth element applications in that vehicle alone. Now, our IBAS program, as well as our sister office, the Defense Production Act investments, are both dedicating resources to this so that we can develop a fully domestic and allied supply chain for these critical materials. And our ICAM office certainly welcomes the opportunity to learn about New England regional efforts in critical materials supply chain. And we invite companies to join that cornerstone as well as DIBC consortiums to drive those collaborations for shared priorities. Next slide. And so here we're going to present a simplified version of our castings and forgings value chain, which we view in terms of three major segments. So you can look at this as upstream, midstream, and downstream. And while the US and its allies do have some strengths, the current casting and forging value stream is, once again, largely dominated by our potential adversaries, to include both China and Russia. Now, in China's case, this appears to be a deliberate result of a strategy and actions over the last quarter century. And we must recognize that even our allies and partners often have strategic needs and goals and relationships that may not always agree with ours. So, assured access to significant domestic capabilities may be required. Now, to produce the metal products that are crucial to modern deterrence and combat, each nation will need a value stream that is close to that current casting and forging value stream. And that's even if they do so choose to aggressively adopt additive or hybrid manufacturing. Making suitable metal products for defense is still going to require us to do the work of extracting ores, that is, and alloying agents, processing them, certifying them, post-processing them, and verifying the results of those previous steps. Now, the military services and OSD have investments in relevant research, modernization, and key portions of the organic industrial base and workforce training. But as you can imagine, much more is going to be needed. And in many cases, sooner is, of course, much better than later. So OSD has developed relevant technology development roadmaps in key areas. But as you might imagine, funding has not kept pace with the developing strategic situation. And in some cases, while DoD action is required, we might lack the authorities and resources to solve all of the relevant problems on our own. And we recognize the need for a whole of government approach that integrates policy changes and specific capability investments in the US and with our allies and international partners for at least a decade. Next slide. So here we identify the gaps that are driving DoD investment, the DoD investment strategy for castings and forgings. So segment-specific gaps are in the salmon, lemon, and mint-colored round rectangles below, and below that value chain. So the width of each of these rectangles is intended to sort of roughly approximate the affected portions of that segment. So we've identified 3 primary strategic gaps in each segment, and those represent the adverse impacts of a large set of specific issues. So discussing all of them would certainly require more time than we have today, but members of our team are certainly available to discuss to those members on the line who might be interested. Now, we've also identified 4 cross-cutting gaps, and 2 of those gaps address issues in strategic visibility as well as data tools, and 2 of those address issues that are associated with our industrial workforce. Now, lastly, DoD's Casting and Forging Industrial Base Implementation Plan for 2025 to 2030 focuses on 4 lines of effort. Those include strategy refinement, metalworking infrastructure, upstream supply chain, as well as our industrial workforce. Next slide. Now, lastly, we're going to shift to hypersonics. And this program is a very critical component, as you can imagine, of the nation's defense and security strategy. And it focuses on the development and delivery of cutting-edge kinetic capabilities. Now, these capabilities, which include our precision-guided munitions, our hypersonic weapons, directed energy weapons, they all enable the military to project power. They also support the neutralization of threats, and they achieve strategic objectives in an increasingly complex global landscape. Now, our IBAS program's kinetic capabilities sector primary focus is on the hypersonic weapons line of effort. And hypersonic weapons, such as the Navy's Conventional Prompt Strike, or CPS, and the Army's Long Range Hypersonic Weapon, fly at speeds that are in excess of Mach 5 and can maneuver after launch. Now, because of the high speed and flexible maneuverability, the missile flight path is nearly impossible to track, which makes them virtually impossible to counter by our adversary, making this very much a weapon of choice against hardened targets. For hypersonics, we have three strategic gaps that shape our value chain. First is the optimization and augmentation of our supply chain that will ensure reliable sources of materials and components to produce the missile. Given the unique characteristics that you might imagine are needed to achieve speeds greater than Mach 5, it's really essential to have the testing infrastructure to ensure that specifications and requirements are being met. Now, the final gap is in addressing the technological and the logistical complexities of integrating the missile components into a fully functional and operational weapon called null-up round. Now, kinetic capabilities value chain starts with the need for reliable sources of those rare earth minerals and ceramics that are tailored to support hypersonic flight requirements. And so continuing to onshore these critical materials remains a very high priority. And it's only going to become more important with any changes in the demand signal from the services. Now, how APEX accelerators can help? Well, one area where you can assist the Department of Defense is in addressing our strategic capability gaps through innovation. Hypersonic weapons are only one line of effort in the kinetic capabilities portfolio. So, building upon the propulsion supply chain is a near term target that has multiple secondary strategic targets besides hypersonics. By scaling up or down propulsion solutions such as solid rocket motors or lightweight aviation turbine engines, industry often discovers alternative uses of their products with smaller missiles, munitions, small unmanned aircraft systems, or with novel approaches to counter adversary small UASs. So, novel incorporation of advanced manufacturing techniques, as you can imagine, would definitely get our attention. Next slide. So, as I hope you've heard throughout the talk today, cultivating a robust stakeholder network to support our federated approach has been absolutely essential. And leveraging authorities, resources, and knowledge in our partner agencies and industry associations so that we can work together to solve these problems as opposed to duplicating efforts across government and private industry is absolutely critical. Now, economic security and our national security are inherently coupled, and we appreciate the role of our APEX accelerators in bolstering both of those. Should you be interested in learning more, you have a wealth of websites you can reach out to, and I will pause now to turn it back over to Ishrad and then take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Schaaf. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. For that detailed and insightful presentations, this has been a wealth of knowledge and understanding, at least for me and everyone who's attending. For those of us who are part of the defense, work with the defense industrial base companies, and we hope to bring all of these resources to those businesses in the defense industrial base. And it's so enlightening to hear you talk about all of those programs and how we can how as APEX Accelerator can help is bringing information and resource to the companies that we work with. So please don't go anywhere because we will have a Q&A session after our next presenter. So now I am really excited to introduce, and we will pivot a little bit to introduce CCAT. Today, we are proud to highlight our collaborations with the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology, or CCAT, a valued strategic partner of the Connecticut APEX and a strong supporter of our program. CCAT plays a crucial role in driving innovation, workforce development, and manufacturing advancement across Connecticut. Next, we'll watch a video. Now, I am honored to introduce a key leader driving economic development and advanced manufacturing. As I said before, please welcome Ron Angelo from CCAT.
Shred, thank you very much today. And I like, thank you very much for the introduction. I like the way you mentioned economic development. Boy, what an amazing presentation, Kristin. Thank you for that. You know, I'm going to just talk a few minutes about the partnership and how we've developed with IBAS and Kristin and her team. But really, I just want to start just a little bit saying, look, we've been in existence here at CCAT for over 20 years. And supporting the industrial base throughout New England and the U.S., certainly focused on Connecticut. And like the APEX Accelerators, although we provide different services that complement each other in many ways, we have very, very similar missions. And we are here to support the industrial base, defense industrial base, but manufacturing industrial base. And those similar missions, the way they come together, can align very, very well and as we move forward in driving impact at scale. Partnerships and collaborations are so important. And as Kristin mentioned in one of her slides, she said strengthening the competitive posture. And I love that statement there. And that's really what we are focused on, not just today, but as we look forward into the future of how do we continue to do that in the most valuable way. So we can go to the next slide, Nishrat. Like all of you on here, we've been dedicated for years now, continuing to improve our organizations, remake our organizations as we continue to respond to the demands of not just the Department of Defense, but again, the entire industrial base throughout the U.S. And most importantly, you know, it's our delivery to customers. And so as we've looked at things internally from CCAT several years ago, we realized the incredible work that we were doing from a technology standpoint and as an applied technology standpoint, leading with that and understanding what technologies can be utilized today in the most powerful way to move the industrial base forward, but also looking at forward out in some years ahead about how we need to be developing programs, outreach, and approaches to companies to accelerate adoption and awareness in those technologies that are coming. And so things around digital transformation, digital thread technologies, automation, autonomous systems, things like that are not new to us. We've been looking at these things early on in its infancy, and it's taken us to where we are today, really, where we looked at how we should be developing our company and our team to deliver on technology first. But as we've done that, we've also understood that, okay, there's demands on talent as well. And Kristin brought up some very startling figures in order to meet the mission, and 100,000 new workers coming in. There's some incredible work from many national partners going on there. However, CCAT's area of focus is really about the existing workforce and how do we reskill that existing workforce. So identifying talent within companies, but also in other industries. And then how do we marry our technology knowledge and base that we've had for decades here and put together the most impactful training programs. So not only are we pushing and new folks into the workforce. And again, that figure being over 100,000 to meet the 1+2. But we also have to look at our existing talent base, our existing companies, and how do we get a 2 or 3x amount of production out of those particular companies. So the technology, the talent that goes with it, developing the right training programs and curriculum to be able to impact companies today, to be able to really accelerate efficiencies within their companies, output within their companies, and also reskilling some of the very large companies in a way that moves their labor base up to make additional room as more and more new employees come into skilled workers come into their particular companies. We have to relieve labor compression and move those skilled workers up through those reskilling efforts. So this sort of slide here really depicts how we've evolved from really CCAT's infancy of just really a technology company to many years ago looking at now talent and training and how that holistically works into transformation. Now, the next slide, Ishrat, as we look at this, how do we do all this? Well, it's not just CCAT. I mean, we have an amazing team here. I can't say enough about them, and I'm going to introduce a few of them at the end of this, but it's with partnerships and it's with collaborations. And we've looked at those throughout Connecticut, throughout the Northeast, certainly the APEX Accelerators, and really around the country to be looking at these incredible models to be saying, look, this is what we're delivering. This is where CCAT really wants to be landing and be really the best at what it can be in its particular areas of focus, and then be teaming up with others to be able to deliver that as well. And the partnership with IBAS, really going back to that slide previously, when you look at the training, really was pivotal in what we've done. And I can't thank Kristin and her team, but the whole focus and that in-depth presentation that Kristin just did, I've seen various iterations over the years, and to be able to look at that organization and look at the focus that they've put on this and the thoroughness, and to be able to say, great, we can partner with them. We can amplify, accelerate, and really just bring our own team here and our others that we partner with to really greater heights through these partnerships with IBAS. And it is absolutely one of the single most important partners that we have had over the past few years. In particular, this digital thread lab, very, very forward thinking, but in two different ways. Because if you look at the goal, data-driven digital technologies, boy, we've talked about being data informed and be able to utilize technologies to extract, consume, and backfeed data into our processes for many years. Now we're making that happen. And we're training in this facility that was sponsored by IBAS, and not just a way where companies are learning about this journey and really where they need to go, but we're also finding that people participating in these training programs can be coming in with their existing software, with the existing tools they have, and we're training them, really your clients, your APEX clients, and how to go back to their companies. And instead of using their software in second gear, we want to use them in fifth gear. So we're teaching them also on the tools that we have, how to utilize them in a much more efficient and agile way. So we're doing two things here. We're getting very, very skilled workers coming in and going back and having immediate impact on their company. We're also bringing in newer folks who are just learning about these technologies, and it may be a little bit of a longer path, but with partners like APEX and others, we're able to move those companies forward. And the purpose of it, the acceleration adoption of the advanced technologies, this is not something that any of us can take lightly. And again, going back to Kristin's presentation, I was able to give another talk last week, and I'm now firmly convinced as a business person that, what we're going through right now is actually going to have a greater impact than all the previous industrial revolutions. when you start looking at these advanced technologies, the data-driven digital thread type technologies, and you start looking at things in addition to that, like artificial intelligence, even getting to the point where quantum computing comes in, the ability to accelerate and really from as an order of magnitude improvements in companies in their efficiencies, much greater output, but also greater improvements in quality. The price per unit, the cost per unit begins to come down. So we're making these companies much more competitive while providing a much greater output. That's my take as a business person. So the goal and the purpose of this is tremendous. And on this presentation as well, we probably don't have time today, is Dr. Amy Thompson, and she is CCAT's Chief Talent and Training Officer. And really not long ago, none of this existed. And really she developed the blueprint, the architecture to get all this in place. And this is an incredible resource for all of your companies throughout the Northeast and New England. They could be coming here for training at a greatly, greatly reduced cost. And it all thanks to IBAS and to the work that we've been able to do in partnership to really get companies to be able to come in, become aware, and take advantage of these programs. Also, Michelle Skirvin is also on the phone, or on this webinar, excuse me, and she leads all of CCAT's business development and also all the company outreach for this DTL. So she's going to be available also to all of you to make sure that companies are aware of this resource and can come in and take advantage of it. So I can only tell you from a CCAT standpoint that the partnership with IBAS has been tremendous. I would urge you to look at all of their programs, their tremendous team that they have there, and the partners that IBAS has been working with, like CCAT and others in the region, to really advance the technologies that we've got here and really improve the business processes and meet that 1+2 mission and other demands throughout the defense industrial base. So, Ishrat, I know I only had a few minutes. I hope I didn't go over, but we'll be happy to answer any questions after, as well as Amy and Michelle being on this as all.
Well, thank you, Ron, for that details, insights from your perspective. And Dr. Schaaf, do you have any point to add to Ron's discussion?
I would just foot stomp what Ron, I think, reiterated as well, that, right, collaboration and partnering is absolutely critical. And so we do look forward to answering your questions and hopefully having some more entrance into the defense industrial base.
Well, thank you so much for both of your time. And please, I would ask our audience, continue to submit your questions in the Q&A function. And so thank you all of our speakers for sharing such valuable insights. So we hope this discussion has provided valuable takeaway and inspired new ideas for collaborations and progress. So please continue to submit the questions, and to help facilitate the question Q&A section, I'm pleased to introduce my co-facilitator, David Pease. David is a senior leader in the APEX Accelerator community, currently with the New Hampshire APEX Accelerator, and he's previously served as the president of NAPEX, the National APEX Accelerator Alliance. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Ishrat. I've been gathering questions here, and I'd like to start with a question for Dr. Schaaf. It's actually a set of questions because it addresses many of us who want to find ways to move the needle for IBAS. So first of all, under what circumstances should a small business try to engage with IBAS?
So I would refer you to our Cornerstone OTA and the website that we can provide you the link for, and that will really highlight those key technology sectors, which I hope resonate with you from my presentation earlier today, but that is an ongoing solicitation. So as you read those details, if you feel that the technology space that your company is working in could make an impact, and that could be in creating additional capabilities or adding capacity, both of those are critical components that we're seeking. So I would certainly request that you look at Cornerstone. And again, we can certainly take your white paper at any time. That's an ongoing solicitation. I will, Dave, add the caveat that, as I think many folks are aware, we're currently under a continuing resolution. And so while we can't initiate what's known as a quote unquote new start during a continuing resolution, once we do have, a formal budget signed by the president, we'd be able to, actively go and action those that were deemed acceptable proposals there.
Thank you, Dr. Schaaf. I'd tag on to that it would be very helpful for us in the APEX community, particularly if we had some successful examples of companies that had entered and participated through that OTA. We encounter many hundreds, many thousands of businesses that are potential candidates, and a big part of our function is to get the right people to the right place at the right time. And so any more insight we can get into that would be very helpful.
Absolutely. And I would say, Dave, I think you guys teed up the structure of this webinar just perfectly, because obviously Ren Angelo and his team at CCAT have worked with IBAS for numerous years through the Cornerstone OTA. And Ron, I don't mean to volunteer you for work, but I know you could share valuable insights and hopefully, sort of calm what might be some concerns about, the contracting process, because again, the OTA process is intended to be very accelerated, and hopefully, Ron, you've experienced that yourself.
Yeah, no, we're happy to do that. Dave, anytime, if there's anyone who'd like to speak with us, we're happy to add some guidance to that. And of course, understand maybe there's some partnership opportunities that we should be looking at as a region. So I'd love to have those discussions.
Terrific. On a completely different subject, I think we all recognize that cybersecurity compliance attainment lags the kinds of levels that we would like to see, or that we honestly need to see. Are there any particular unique cyber concerns for IBAS?
So as you could imagine, Dave, we have mandates as to what we have to comply with from the departmental level. And so obviously that would be part of, the contracts and associated flow downs, because to your point, ensuring the security of our information is absolutely vital.
That's exactly the answer I expected, and we are working to do everything we can to encourage compliance. Is there a particular strategy that small businesses can take to position themselves to get involved?
Again, I would really refer you to hopefully the brief. I think Ishrat's going to push out the slides that we shared today, because it's really intended to provide you all with a visual of our investment strategy. So we have our defense critical technology sectors, and I know that can be a wealth of information. And so that's why we really are striving on highlighting the gaps in those value chains, because that's where we are being directed to make critical investments. So I think as you all review the brief, again, visit the Cornerstone OTA website. I'm hoping that you all will identify some areas where you think the companies associated with your region's APEX accelerators can make an impact. Because again, adding capability and increasing capacity is going to be absolutely vital for our nation, to work at pace. And, I think World War II taught us a lot. It wasn't necessarily the very best cutting edge technology, but the fact that we were able to pump capability out and really overwhelm in terms of capacity is key. So wherever your partners recognize opportunities for them to contribute, whether it be, novel capability or whether it be added capacity, both of those are absolutely essential.
This question is from a Vermont small business that does research and development on supply chain optimization technologies. They're saying that they've applied to many opportunities listed in SAM and approached many organizations within DoD with no real success so far. Any tips as to how they can break in and help with what are clearly substantial supply chain optimization needs?
Yeah, and so I think as you all can certainly appreciate, the Department of Defense is incredibly complex and incredibly large. And so we have to strive to align to bona fide requirements. And so, as I shared with you all early in the presentation, our authorities with the IBAS program are very broad, and I think you all would agree, very powerful. So, perhaps, of course, the company's capability is very noteworthy, but they might have been approaching an office that, while they're interested, doesn't necessarily align with the tasking that office has been given. So yeah, I would certainly advise, if you look at this brief and see alignment, to what we're doing, certainly reach out. And again, you can apply through Cornerstone. But again, offices have their own mandates and they're aligning with those bona fide requirements. So I'm sure they weren't dismissing the capability, but they were probably simply lacking the authority to pursue that.
Understood. It is a challenge to match up requirements with capabilities. Sarvesh asks, I run a small business in high-tech embedded systems product R&D and have done several defense projects in the last 15 years, but have no background or experience in manufacturing. Is there a role for a company like Sarvesh's in these kinds of IBAS projects?
Absolutely. So while manufacturing is, certainly a large sector that we invest in, as I discussed earlier, it's not simply, that hard, tangible good, but working, to create robust digital infrastructure and associated security, creating that whole digital thread is going to be absolutely critical for us as well. So yeah, please don't think of us strictly as manufacturing. We need to look at the entirety of the ecosystem that we're supporting. So if you can help illuminate where your company fits into that, I think that could be particularly instructive.
Terrific. I think that I have, they're coming in as I'm speaking here. Changing the subject a little bit, is there a way that APEX Accelerators and small businesses can help promote IBAS workforce initiatives?
Absolutely. And in fact, we were really fortunate to be invited as the keynote to the Office of Small Business, the Mentor Protege Program meeting. I think it was this last July. And so that allowed us to reach out and touch the breadth of APEX Accelerators and really familiarize them with our IBAS program, right? Because you all live in those localities, your regions. And so then that really was intended to empower you all to be able to come back to us and help, identify alignment with companies and capabilities you have that can help bridge those gaps that we know we need to target our investments at.
Thank you. With that, I think I'm just about fresh out of questions. There are a few that are somewhat duplicative with things I've already asked, and there is in the chat a question as to whether this is the correct Cornerstone website. I'm sure that's something that we don't need to ask you. With that, I would turn it back to Ishrat.
Thank you so much, Dave, and thank you. Our deepest gratitude to Dr. Schaaf, Ron, and thank you, Dave, for really being the co-facilitator. As we wrap up today's session, really everything that we've learned today, and I want to remind everyone that the presentation will be shared with everyone who registered. So it's a wealth of knowledge to revisit and review those the presentations Dr. Schaaf presented today. For sure, I'm going to be reviewing and learning so much more from the presentation. Finally, to all our attendees, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your engagement and the thoughtful questions. Please reach out to your APEX counselors for any follow-up questions regarding this topic and any aspects of government contracting. We are here to support you on your government contracting journey. And follow us at CT APEX on our social media page, Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, don't forget to visit the CT APEX calendar page for our upcoming events and workshops. So again, thank you to all who participated, and thank you to all our presenter and Dave. We really appreciate your contributions and your time today. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.